I want you to take a moment to write down a problem that exists in the world. Now, I know that's not a very positive way to open up a podcast, particularly one around growth mindset, but I want you to do it. Take a moment, write down a problem that exists in the world. It could be one that is directly related to you as you see it, or one that exists on the planet, from homelessness to mental health, whatever it might be. I want you to take a moment, write it down, or at least bring it to mind. And then I want you to consider, what does that problem that you wrote down have in common with every other problem that exists? That problem you wrote down, and any number of problems that you could write down, has one thing in common with every other problem that exists. We're going to explore that in this episode. Let's grow. Think about it for just a moment. And what is it that makes a problem a problem? Whether you wrote down homelessness, you wrote down, the absence of food, you wrote down inequities in pay, you wrote down, what's happening with the environment, or disadvantaged individuals, whatever it is, okay? That problem has in common with every other problem, and you cannot name a problem that doesn't have this characteristic or quality, and it's simply this. There is the reality, which is the current state of affairs, and there is the possibility. The reason why a problem is a problem, why we consider it a problem in the first place, is because there is this gap that exists between what is actually happening and what could be. Think about that for just a moment. We look at the issue of homelessness, and we consider that, man, there are so many empty buildings and empty places and empty residences for people to be living on the streets when it's cold. Or, someone will go hungry tonight, yet grocery stores, supermarkets are full of food. So the reason why we look out at it and we consider it a problem is because the reality is different than what we believe to be possible. And that gap that exists between the two, that gap that exists between reality and possibility, is what's causing the angst or the anxiety that we experience, whether that be for the world or in our own lives. When you look at your own life, what you consider a problem is only because there's what's currently happening, or the current state of affairs in your own life, your family, your bank account, your health, your spiritual practice, being on purpose, whatever it is. There's the current reality, and there is what you believe is possible. There is how you think it could be. So all problems exist because we want that gap to be closed. We want to close the gap between the reality and the possibility. But here's the thing, and it's one of my favorite concepts to explore in all of personal development, is simply this. It's not yours until, or a problem is not a problem for you until you're willing to take ownership of it. Until you're willing to take ownership. Why is that important? Because where you will not take ownership, you will not influence or impact the change. Does that make sense? Right? You cannot change what you're unwilling to own. You cannot, you will not, you won't change what you're unwilling to own. And so until you look at it and say that is a reality that I want to change. That's a reality that does not represent the possibility, and I am going to do something about it. Until that moment occurs, then you'll continue, you'll find a way, essentially, we find a way to become comfortable in something that is less than what is possible. We find ourselves now comfortable and resting in what we know is a lowered standard than what the possibility is. So we look out at it. I look out at it. I say, well, okay, that could be different. Yeah, but. And so because I've been unwilling to take ownership of it, then I won't take the necessary steps to have it be different. And typically when things don't go the way I want it to go, or things don't go the way you want it to go, then what happens? Well, you think about it for a moment, okay? It's probably not you because you're listening to this podcast, but other people, okay? Not as enlightened as you are. Let's do it that way, all right? So it's like, okay, when things don't go the way they want it to go, the first thing that people do is what? They look for someone else to, you got it. They look for someone else to blame. Whose fault is it? Who's the reason that this did or did not happen? Who's the reason that this did or did not occur? When things don't go the way they want it to go, their ideal, their expectation is not met, then they look for someone else. They look for someone else to blame. And sometimes we spend a lot of time in the place of blame, but we finally run out of other people to blame because why? It's not changing. Like blaming someone else does not make the reality become the possibility. And so if we get tired or frustrated enough, we run out of people to blame. And if we're not careful, we can move to another level, which is shame. Shame is when we're critical of ourselves. We beat ourselves up. Can you relate to that? Are you a person who beats yourself up quite a bit, very hard on yourself, very self-critical? You know, when things don't go the way you wanted it to go, it's like, man, God, what was I thinking? Oh, that was stupid. See, why did I get my hopes up? Why did I even allow myself to get excited? And what can happen is we run out of people to blame, and then we turn that resentment towards ourselves, and it becomes shame. It is my viewpoint that shame does not exist on the path of transformation. Shaming does not lead to transformation, my viewpoint. So, okay, well, I look for someone else to blame, I run out of people to blame. And then I turned it towards myself. We turn towards yourself. Okay, now shame. Well, eventually we recognize that even through shaming or being self-critical isn't making the reality become the possibility. It still doesn't close the gap. So blame doesn't close the gap. Shame doesn't close the gap. Well, what else is there? Well, some make a pit stop at justification. And justification is really where we start to become comfortable with a lesser than the ideal. We become comfortable with a lowered standard. Justifications you hear are, things like, well, I'm only human. Everybody makes mistakes. They look at a life. There was once a dream of a particular lifestyle. They settle for something else. And that becomes, well, I don't need all that. I'm happy here. I'll be grateful with this portion. And this is not anti-gratitude as much as it is understanding that we can become comfortable with a standard that is less than what we are capable of. And it's not because we are indeed grateful for it as much as we have chosen the justification versus the joy of overcoming the challenge. There are individuals who choose comfort over greatness on a daily basis. And the justifications are, and it is my viewpoint that that's the reason why some celebrate the fall of other people. There are those, it's been all over media and all over news. Typically when someone, is of high like status and notoriety, they fall, be a professional athlete, entertainer, actor, actress, right? That fall from grace is usually very, very loud. But if we pay attention to it, it is because oftentimes it's individuals who are looking at the fall and justifying why they never attempted to make the climb. And you hear things like, see, that's why, they say money is the root of all evil. It doesn't say that, but, they misunderstand. Or that's the reason why I don't want fame. That's the reason why I don't want the notoriety. That's the reason why I don't want to truly be successful. That's the reason why I don't really want to have my own business, because people attack, people come for you. This is what happens. And they learn that those individuals, oftentimes there's a balance that exists. There is no such thing as anything or any person being all good. That cannot exist. Why? The law of polarity says that in order for anything to exist, the opposite must exist also. So you cannot have all good and no bad. You can't have all positive and no negative. You can't have all up and no down. That is against the law. That is fantasy. And so when we see the falls, an individual who celebrates the fall of someone else only puts themselves in line to experience the same. They experience the same. But those justifications start to come out. And I have these justifications now as a reason for not going after it myself. So blame doesn't work. Shame doesn't work. Justification also gets tiring because ultimately I'm left to reflect with myself. And I know that there's a part of me, there's a part of you that recognizes when we're playing a game smaller than what we're capable of. So beyond blame, shame, and justification, there is now what's left. There is ownership, responsibility. And responsibility does not mean that it's my fault. It doesn't mean that it's your fault. It doesn't mean that you're the reason that it happened. It does not mean that you are the person to blame, right? That is ownership, and responsibility is not about fault. In this context, responsible simply means that no matter where I've been and no matter what I have been through, what comes next is up to me. No matter where I've been, no matter what I've been through, what comes next is up to me. Wherever you find yourself currently, I want you to just say that, just repeat after me. No matter where I've been, no matter what I've been through, what comes next is up to me. This is the realization, and it is the recognition that no matter what, you control your attitude and your response. You control how you'll respond to whatever circumstance or situation. And because your ability to respond is always within you, there's a power that you always have, regardless of the current environment or that current reality. To say it differently, you may look out into your world currently and see that you don't have the results that you want. You don't have the money that you want. You don't have the relationship that you want. You don't have the health that you want. You can look out at that right now and see it, be honest about it, call it what it is, and recognize that until you are willing to own it, you can do nothing to change it. If as long as you look out at it and it's all the women and all the men and the system and the world and the unfair breaks, and if it's because of something that is outside of you, then you have to wait for whatever that something is to change or be different. And as a result of that, your life and the greatness that you can experience is on pause. There is a different way where we go beyond blame, shame, and justification, and we take ownership, and we recognize that tomorrow can indeed be better than today. And we have the power to make it so. All high achievers answer that question in the affirmative. When asked the question, can tomorrow be better than today? They answer with a resounding yes. And then the follow-up question to that, do you believe that you have the power to make it so? And high achievers, a resounding yes. I believe that that's you. So you look at any problem that may exist for you in your world right now. Step one is for you to take ownership of it, to take responsibility for having it be different. Not responsibility for how we got here as much as the responsibility of it being different. Because as one of my mentors shared with me when I was going on and on about growing up and what I didn't have and what, wasn't available and how much money wasn't present and so forth, he just cut me off in the middle of my sob story and he said, Courtland, simply this. He said, if you didn't come from money, you have a responsibility to make sure that money can come from you. What he's essentially saying there is, until there is ownership by you, then there cannot be any real change. I hope that helps. And if it does, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast does exist. I would love for you to be part of my email list. And you can do that by going to courtlandwarren.com/opt-in, OPTIN. And yes, I'm going to email you. I would prefer that method versus depending, frankly, on the platforms. And so if you'll share your email address with me, if you got value from this, all the content that I put out is content related to a growth mindset and being able to translate a growth mindset into, or transfer your growth mindset into the marketplace. I want to see you win. I love being a part of your journey, and we'll see you for the next episode.